begin with, that equals 3 times t to the 1/2. So if you're finding the antiderivative, you know it's going to be t to what power? What power is it going to be to if it's the antiderivative? Not Calvin, someone else. 1/2, so 3 over 2. And that 3 is already there, but when you drop 3 over 2 to the front, you need to cancel that. So the way we've been writing it, would be write it as like 3 over 2, like this. Because when you drop the 3 over 2 to the front, it cancels with the 3 over 2, leaving just the 3. But is that a form that we would like to leave something in? No. So if we simplify that, that's the same thing as 2 over 3 times t to the 3 over 2. What cancels there? What cancels? The 3's cancel. So your final nice answer would be 2 times t to the 3/2. 2 times 3 to the to the 3/2. You know that this is going to increment by 1, so that's where it's going to be 3 over 2 right there. Value on this. We were starting with an n value of 1/2, so what's n plus 1? 3/2. When you add 1 to something, you add. I put it on the bottom just to show the same form that we've been using before. It's just the same mechanical thing. Yeah. And I flipped it over because we were dividing by 3/2 is the same thing as multiplying by 2/3. This before you start working on it, what should you rewrite it as? G of x is equal to what?
Negative
2x to the negative 5 plus what?
5x to the negative 1.
Negative 1 plus 3x squared. So you have to do just each one of them.
Right.
Just each one of them. So you know it's going to be negative 2x to the negative what?
It's the negative
4 all over negative 4
right.
plus 5x to the negative.
You wrote the wrong x.
The wrong x.
5x to the negative 1 first.
5x to the negative what? I'm sorry. Oh, did I? Oh, right here. That when I copied the problem.
Yeah.
So it's going to be 5x to the negative. Oh, what's it going to be?
It's going to be 0.
5x to the 0? All over. We'll put a question with this over 0. So there's a problem here, right? Okay. So there's a problem here. Let's just skip this for now. Plus what?
3x. Or sorry.
Yeah, 3x over 3. So which ones are we okay with? We're okay with this. It could be simplified, right? And we're okay with this. This could be simplified. But there's a problem here. What's the problem? Okay, so there's a big problem right here in that you did the same thing, but like x, you theoretically you're okay with x to the 0, right? Because what is x to the 0? 1. But what's the big problem there?
0.
The 0. Like the derivative of 5 is 0, so you can't divide by 0 there. You can't divide by 0 there. So this is the thing you need to understand at this point. I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you something really, really helpful. So effectively what you need to know is, what is the antiderivative of 1 over x? Another way of saying that is the derivative of what? The derivative of what is 1 over x? That's what we're saying. The derivative of what is 1 over x? And this is where I just get to tell you it because we can't prove it. You just get to use it. You ready, everybody? Natural log of x plus c. This is just something I'm giving you right now, which is the integral of 1 over x. And the way you actually do it is you do this. You do the natural log of the absolute value of x. Why do you do the absolute value? Anybody know why you put the absolute value in there? You can't do something. You can't take the natural log of a negative number. So you have to memorize that. So if you go back over here, Calvin, if you go back over to here, what's this going to be? What's the antiderivative of 5x to the negative 1? 5 what? 5 ln of the absolute value of x. Yep, plus c, like that. Yes, there it is. You just get that. So what does that also mean, Calvin? What's the derivative of the natural log of x?
1 over.
Yes, exactly, which is x to the negative 1. Yeah, the derivative of ln x is that. Yep. And then you might ask, what's the integral of ln x? We're not touching that. We're not touching that. We do it once. The integral of 1 over x is ln x with an absolute value. You just need to memorize that. That's just something you don't have to prove. It's going to be 1 over
ln 2
yep.
times 2 to the 0.
2 to the x plus what?
4x
Plus.
c.
So we know that is equal to capital F of x, right? But we want, what does it say up here? We want it to be f of 0 to be what? 5. So when we plug in 0 for x, we want 5 to come out. When we plug in 0 for x, we want 5 to come out. So we know that f of 0 is equal to 5. So we plug in 0 for all of the x's, and what do you get? 1 over ln 2 times 2 to the 0 plus 4 times 0 plus c is equal to 5. That 5 went there. Well, what's 2 to the 0? 1. So we're going to end up with 1 over ln 2 plus, what's 4 times 0? So it's just plus c is equal to 5. So what does c equal? 5 minus 1 over ln2. So we go back and now we say, what is our f of x going to be? 1 over ln2 times 2 to the x plus 4 over x plus what? 5 minus 1 over ln2. That would be our final answer here. The whole idea was to find the c value. We needed to find that c value. When you plug in 0 into that, do you get 5? Yes. When you plug in 0 into that, you get 5, which is what we want. And when you take the derivative, do you get the right derivative? Yes. This gives us the derivative we want when we take the derivative, and it gives us the proper output when we plug in the number 5. Does that make sense, Morgan?
The integral
From,
two,
oh, you need to figure it out, right?
right,
Of this function,
2x squared.
like that, right?
Right.
By the area bounded by, right? So what might you need to draw so that you can figure this out?
The graph.
So let's look at the function first. Let's factor it a little bit. We have 2x squared minus 8. How can that be factored? What can I factor out?
The 2.
2 times?
X squared minus.
And can I factor that? Yeah, 2 times what? It's the difference of squares. Can you factor that for me?
X minus 2.
Uh-huh. X minus 2x plus 2. So where does that cross the x-axis? How many places?
2.
2. It crosses at negative 2 and?
2.
And where's it cross the y-axis?
Negative 8.
Oh, negative 8, not positive 8. Negative 8, right? So what parabola are we looking at? We're looking at this parabola right here. So you're looking at this right here. You're looking at that right there. So you're integrating from what to what?
From negative 2 to 2.
Negative 2 to 2. So if you integrate this from negative 2 to 2, are you going to get a positive or a negative answer?
Give me a negative answer.
Why are you going to get a negative answer? Where is that blue parabola? Where does it live? Below the x-axis. So if you tried to integrate that, it's going to come out to be negative. So if you wanted the true area, what do you have to put up front of this? You put absolute value around it, or you could just make it negative, right? The opposite of a negative is a positive. So you have to integrate this. Gabby, can you tell me what the indefinite integral of 2x squared minus 8 is? Now you just have to plug things in really carefully. What do you get? You get 2 over 3 times 2 cubed minus 8 times 2 minus negative 2 to the third over 3 minus 8 times negative 2. What's the easiest thing to get wrong on this? The negative. So you have to be real careful. So what do you have? 2/3 times 8 minus 16. And then you have minus, what here? You have negative 16 over 3. Is that correct? Plus 16. Is it really easy to get this wrong? Yeah, it is. So this is going to be 16 over 3 minus 16 plus 16 over 3 minus what? 16? How many 16 over 3s do we have? So we have 2 times 16 over 3 minus what? Minus 16 and minus 16 is minus what?
That's 32.
32. So what do you have here? 32 over 3 minus 32. We need a common denominator, right? So what's that going to be? 32 over 3 minus something 96 over 3. So that's going to be what? 60 what? Negative 64 over 3. And that got out to be negative because what do we still have to multiply by?
A negative.
This whole thing gets multiplied by negative. So what does it end up being? 64 over 3. Is that a lot of algebra? Yes. Could you expect to have to do that on your own? This right here, this is day 18, sorry. I'm giving you a few things here that are super important. If you memorize those, what does that automatically give you? Everything right here. If I tell you that the derivative of sine is cosine, that tells you that the antiderivative of cosine is sine. If you know one direction, you automatically will have the other direction. If you have one direction, you'll automatically have the other direction. So I'm going to leave these up on the board. I'd like you to find first one. The first piece is pretty straightforward because it is a nice piece of a polynomial, which you guys should be super helpful with, super familiar with. So that's just going to be 2x cubed over 3 plus, we know the integral of 1 over x. I just told you that, so that's just going to be 3 what? 3 ln of, make it absolute value of x, plus 6x to the negative 1 all over negative 1 plus c. So you clean that up a little bit, and what do you get? 2/3 x cubed plus 3 ln absolute value of x minus 6x to the negative 1 plus c. That would give you full credit right there. Is going to be 5 tangent x. And then what's the integral of cosine? Sorry, the derivative of what is cosine? Sine. So it's going to be minus 4 sine x. And what's the integral of sine? negative cosine. So this is going to turn into positive 2 cosine x plus c. Because what's the derivative of cosine? Negative sine. So that's where the negative comes from, and that's where the sine comes from. What's the derivative of sine? Cosine. And what's the derivative of tangent? 1 over cosine squared. How'd you guys do on this one? 3. You have to remember the chain rule for this one, the chain rule. So what's the outer function in this case? What's the outer function? Cosine. What's the inner function? X squared. So in this case, f prime of x is going to be negative. The derivative of cosine is? The derivative of cosine is? The derivative of sine is cosine. The derivative of cosine is? So it's negative sine of x squared, that's correct, times what? Times 2x. So when you clean this up, what do you end up with? 2x sine of x squared. Is everybody with me so far?
Yes.
It's not, don't have right now is, let's say you didn't have this, and I just asked you for 4, you right now would have to do guess and check until you got it right. This was to lead you to that one. This was to lead you to that. So chain rule is a rule for what? For differentiation, right? Hold on, let me finish my sentence. Hold on. This is a differentiation rule. We haven't learned the way to undo it. This one was asking you for the derivative. Yes. Number 3 was asking you for a derivative. Number 4 is asking you for the integral. If the derivative of f of x is g of x, what is the integral of g of x? Exactly. F of x plus c. Yes. If you take the derivative of something and get g of x, the integral of that thing is where you started. That is correct. Okay, so try this one for me. Get back to the board with your partner. No calculator. You need 2 things. You need a point and you need a slope. What's the easier one to find? Point. So plug in to do f of pi over 4. That's going to be 3 cosine of 3 pi over 4. And you have to remember what your trig circle looks like. 3 pi over 4 is how many degrees, everybody? Oh, it's 135 degrees. You have to remember that. It's going all the way into the second quadrant. You took trig. Pi over 4 is how many degrees, kids?
I have no idea. Oh, 45.
45. What's 45 times 3? 135. If your standards for yourself are on the floor, you're not going very far in life. You might be pleasantly happy with your ignorance, but I want you to strive for higher than that, okay? Pi over 4 is 45 degrees. 3 times that is 135. It's in the second quadrant. You go all the way to here. You need to figure out what that point is right there. What is that point right there? Anybody know if this is the unit circle, what point that is? It's negative root 2 over 2, comma, root 2 over 2. You have to remember that. So therefore, what's this going to be? F of 3 pi over 4 is going to be what? 3 times what? Cosine is which value there? The negative one or the positive one? The negative one or the positive one? Find the, first we have to find the derivative. It's the one thing you guys all did correctly, so own it. What's the derivative of that going to be? Negative 9 sine of 3x. Is that correct? So now we need the derivative evaluated at pi over 4. So it's going to be negative 9 sine of 3 pi over 4. So if the cosine of 3 pi over 4 was negative root 2 over 2, what's the sine? What's the sine going to be? Root 2 over 2. So it's negative times root 2 over negative 9. So that's our slope right there. So what's the equation of our line going to be? Y minus what? Y minus what? Negative 3 root 2 over 2 equals negative 9 times root 2 over 2 times x minus what? Pi over 4. Many of you wrote out the full thing. I love seeing that. That was really good. Like Henry, what you wrote out right there is fine. That would get you right there. That would be great work. I love it. That would give you most of the credit right there. But to get full credit, you do have to memorize your basic trig values. There are really only 2 triangles you need to memorize for your basic trig values. You know what those 2 triangles are?
45.
Exactly. So you have root 3 over 2. If I could write it out. So how many degrees is this? 30 degrees. So you have root 3 over 2. What's the height here? 1/2, and this is 1. That's the first triangle you have to memorize. And then what's the only other one? 45 degrees, right? If you do 45 degrees, this is 1, this is 45 degrees. And what's this? Root 2 over 2 and? Root 2 over 2. Everything else is a reflection of those 2 triangles. all of the other trig values you need are there. You need to know what this point is, and this point is, and then you're all set. You really only need to know point A here and point B there. You need to know those. You need to know your base. Chat here. So the first thing you need to do is, since this is area, it's really, really, really important that you make a graph. You can't just do the integral, because if you just do the integral, you get displacement, which takes away things that go below the x-axis. So when you graph this, you end up with something that looks like this, correct? 0, pi, and 2 pi. Who agrees with that? What's the height of this? That's 1. Doesn't really matter, but you got that. You're doing the integral from 0 to pi of sine x dx, right? But then you're doing the opposite of the integral from pi to 2 pi of sine x dx. Are you with me so far? Why is it negative? Why did I put a negative sign right there? Sine. Negative cosine x, right? That's the integral right there. So what are you looking at? If this is our capital F right there, you're looking at f of pi minus f of 0 minus f of 2 pi minus f of pi. Does everybody see where those came from? The limits of integration here and here are right there, and the limits of integration for here are right there. Stop right now and ask me any question. Actually doing, you are doing, in parentheses, negative cosine of pi minus negative cosine of 0 minus negative cosine of 2 pi minus negative cosine of pi. What can you get rid of first? What's one thing there you'd like to get rid of first? What?
Why did you add that on the left? The pi.
The pi? Where?
0 to...
Yeah, so what do you have here? Negative cosine of pi
Cos X.
plus what? Cosine of 0, correct? Minus negative cosine of 2 pi plus cosine of pi. This is where you need to remember all your trig values now. What is cosine of pi? Anybody remember what cosine of pi is?
-1.
It's -1. So what's negative? So you have negative, -1. What's cosine of 0? 1 minus negative cosine of 2 pi is 1, right? Plus, and what's cosine of pi? -1. So what do you end up with here? 1 plus 1 minus what? So the answer is